I'm PhocusWire editor-in-chief Mitra Sorrells, and I am joined by Scott Wilson. He is president of Sabre Hospitality. Welcome, Scott.
Good morning, Mitra. How are you?
I'm great to have you here. So I would really like to just continue discussing what you presented during the launch event at the Phocuswright Conference, which was Sabre's Synexus Retail Studio. You shared some examples of some of the beta clients that you have been working with. Can you talk a bit more about the revenue opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we sort of step back and kind of understand what's happened, especially during the pandemic. A lot of times hoteliers have thought about growth through, I would call more traditional means of expanding their footprint. How do you get more properties into the portfolio? And that's really come up to we're at a different point in time. There's saturation in various markets. Post-pandemic, obviously interest rates are up quite a bit now. Access to capital is difficult. Being able to grow in more traditional ways is hard. And before, there were really only a couple of levers to try to get more revenue out of each property that you had. And really it was occupancy and it was rate. And we've always kind of used shorthand RevPAR as a way to kind of understand how well is a hotel performing. And it feels very narrow right now. And hoteliers are feeling as though that's very narrow. They're all competing in the marketplace, try to get the same customers to go to their property versus someone else, try to get the most rate that they can. But if you think about how you could expand the range of levers for a hotelier, how attractive that might be, and hoteliers are starting to really think about this in a way that, for someone who's been in the industry for a long time, it's novel and refreshing.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about then that on-property revenue growth opportunity, a much more holistic strategy than just looking at the room. Talk a bit more about the value of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to use shorthand, total RevPAR. I'm going to call it TrevPAR. I don't know if that's been coined yet, but let's go with it for now. Okay. The idea is that there's a number of elements on any property. Sometimes we don't even think about their ability to be monetized. I gave an example at Phocuswright that I think resonated with people because it's kind of a different way of thinking about things. And I'll do a shorthand version here, but basically the idea was, okay, I'm a hotel. I'm a modest 2-star, 3-star property. I really just have rooms that people kind of check in, check out. Really, what else is there for me to monetize? And I was having a conversation with one of the owners, and he talked about the fact that, well, now that you're talking about it, I've got this, it's okay Wi-Fi, but really if you're right next to the WAP, if you're one of the 6 or 8 rooms right near the WAP, the wireless access portal, your internet's pretty good, but if you get far away from that, not so good anymore. Do you mean I could actually turn that into something that's an attribute and I can start selling against being close to WAP? And the answer was yes, absolutely. And you can just see the light bulbs go off like, oh, now I can start to think about my property much, much differently than king bed versus 2 queens or high floor versus low floor. And it was really exciting to see kind of the door open and suddenly the world of possibilities was there. And retail studio is really different in that it's designed to allow anything to be an attribute. So if you think of traditional room-based attributes, and I mentioned a couple there, room type, high floor, low floor, near an elevator, et cetera, and now you can go to something much, much wider than that, it starts to become really exciting. And then I'll add to that, which is, well, what if you could start to monetize things that aren't connected to the room? And I'll give one particular example I don't think I shared at Phocuswright, but it's a really compelling one is, parking lots are actually an attribute that you could potentially sell independent of the room. And this is true for city center hotels where they have large parking lots that they use part-time for hotel guests. But what if you could monetize it for city guests, people who are just coming into the city? You probably have a parking app that you can find and select a hotel parking lot. Or what if you're a smaller property and you happen to be near an event? And I use an example of near a football stadium, for example. You've probably seen this where people put signs out front that says parking here for $20. Well, what if you could turn that into a digital asset that you actually can market and sell beforehand and you can revenue manage, and it's not associated to the room at all? Well, again, retail studio is designed to work agnostic of a room. And so now you can start to create attributes and products that are completely separate from a room reservation and really unlock any range of possibilities. Now that TrevPAR idea isn't just occupancy and rate, it's tens, if not hundreds of additional ideas that you could use to get total revenue higher for any one particular property.
Yeah, those are just such interesting ideas. I mean, I know personally, I would certainly pay for, better Wi-Fi closer to the WAP. And yeah, the idea of the parking, I think, is really interesting because you probably have a lot of people that are maybe staying on property that didn't rent a car, don't have a car with them, and yet you have locals that maybe really need that space. So that's
absolutely right. I mean, understandably, we've tended to look at things fairly narrowly through the lens of a hotel guest. And that's understandable. Yeah. That's the way the industry has been built over the last, many decades. And so I will tell you that it's a bit of a new idea, and hoteliers love this idea. But really what's interesting is trying to educate and train hoteliers to become retailers. And that's a journey that we're all going through together.
So are you sensing an interest and willingness to go in this direction?
Without exception, when we've started to talk about this product and give these ideas, I used the expression a few minutes ago, the light bulbs going off, the door being open and suddenly seeing a whole different world. Absolutely. Yeah. Without exception, we see people suddenly going, yes, this is something that makes a lot of sense. We want to go down that direction. I will acknowledge, though, and I alluded to this a second ago, that journey of how to get there is one that we're having to help our customers figure out. And that's okay. But what we're finding is that there are certain hotel groups that are really feeling as though this is the next generation, and their desire to partner with us and learn that journey and articulate that journey together is just as compelling as the product itself. And so the enthusiasm, I think, is substantial.
So let's talk a bit, you talked quite a bit there about some of the modern strategies related to distribution and retailing, but certainly there are a lot of other challenges that we hear about hoteliers facing. Coming out of the pandemic, we have heightened guest expectations, there's staffing issues. How are technologies helping hoteliers address some of those other on-property challenges?
It's a great question because it's still so topical. I mean, we are seeing a stabilization in kind of the employment cycle right now, which is nice. Certainly 2021 and early parts of 22, it was like nothing we'd ever seen before, but it's still a very real issue for most hoteliers. And really what I would say it's been an underrepresented area in hotel technology is really focusing on something that's going to sit on property and really enhance guest experience in a way that's more holistic. You see traditional PMSs, and there are some very, very strong ones in the market that are really strong around portfolio management, checking a guest in, checking a guest out. They do the basics very, very well. Many hoteliers over the years have started to add on, I would call onesie-twosie pieces of technology, maybe some technology to optimize housekeeping, maybe some technology for guest communication, guest chat. But that's a lot of burden on any particular property. You have to learn lots of different systems. The systems don't always talk very well together. Really, the mentality right now is how do you help hoteliers do so much more with less? And, that's something we've heard for a long time, but it's especially important today. And really, we think there's a category of software called task management or hotel optimization, operational optimization, that we think is going to be a really important element of that story going forward. And I guess the shorthand way to think about it is this is a technology that will sit on top of or in conjunction with the PMS. So you don't need to change out a PMS, but you can bring this on top of your PMS to bring all these various elements together and really provide that holistic guest experience, guest management set of capabilities.
So you made mention there of systems talking to one another, and certainly something that we have heard quite a bit about for many years is the fact that the legacy technology is just very siloed, and that just creates all kinds of issues. Talk to us a bit about why it is so important to have systems integrated.
Well, a lot of times the way that the hotelier has to manage multiple systems is through notes in a PMS. And for many people who are watching this, you probably have had some experience with PMSs. There's a notes field for every guest that checks in. And hopefully, someone is checking that and making sure that the note has been read, it's been acted upon, and that the service delivery has been complete. So really, when you talk about holistic management, the idea is that what if each of these systems actually had a messaging mechanism to actually take each message and move it back and forth to the various piecemeal applications and ensure that there was some sort of collaboration. So we actually bought a product last year called Nuvula. It is a full cloud native product that actually, again, sits on top of a PMS, and it's integrated with a number of PMSs. And it has a number of different modules or it can use as a messaging intermediary between existing modules at a hotel property. Now you have greater certainty that nothing's going to get lost, if you will. I used to use this example of when I had younger kids, which I hate to say it's been a number of years ago now, but when they were younger, I used to put a request onto an online booking engine saying, roll-away bed desired. Yeah. And the probability of me getting that rollaway bed in the room by the time I opened the door was about 0%.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. The hotels always had the best intentions, and you'd call down, they say, hey, we asked for the rollaway bed. Oh, absolutely. Of course, Mr. Wilson will bring that right up. But that's a good example of those messages getting lost. Yeah. So the idea of Nuvola is to make sure that those sort of requests actually get moved across the various channels, so that not only does it happen at the reservation and it sits within the PMS, but a message gets triggered at check-in to make sure that housekeeping gets the notification that, in fact, that bed is expected and will be delivered and put in the room before the 4 o'clock check-in time. So that's a perfect, I think it's a really good example, kind of brings home the value of having this interconnectedness without having to scrap all the systems in place today, but find that layer that can sit on top to provide that smart messaging across.
Yeah, I've certainly had a very similar experience.
I see. As soon as you went like that, I was like, yep, you've been there with me too.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, great to hear about these solutions that are helping to fix all of these challenges. So, Scott Wilson, president of Sabre Hospitality, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.